So once again, we have been recording our budget presentations and having them placed on the website. We've been getting some good feedback that individuals appreciate that process, and once again, we'll do that this evening. So what we have here is where we started in February. You'll see on February 5th, our budget deficit was $1.3 million, which would require an increase of 4.62%. And then last month on February 26th, we presented updated numbers with the budget deficit going down to $773,000 or 3.65%.
So as you can see, based on our meeting on February 26th, the modifications we had to expenditures, the primary driver was the modification to the CIT budget. The reduction to that particular line item of the budget resulted in an overall decrease to our expenditures to the tune of almost $30,000. And conversely, on the revenue side, we had some updated projections as it pertained to certain line items of our budget: real estate tax revenues, interim taxes, interest earnings, among those bigger cost revenue drivers. So overall, at that point, the budget was adjusted to the tune of $510,000 based on those modifications presented during the February meeting. So as we look at the modifications to the expenditures for this evening, the teacher retirement, so teachers have to notify administration by March 1st of their intent to retire by the end of the year. Based on senior teachers retiring and new teachers replacing, there's a significant salary differential between the two. So when you exclude all of the retiring staff members and replace those staff members, the early part of the salary schedule, the resulting impact is almost $240,000 of savings. We did receive our second look on our medical insurance, which includes our prescription, vision, and dental. That achieved an overall savings for us of $200,000. Our employee severance payments, so individuals that via contract obligations are entitled to severance payments, we initially projected a number early on in the budget that we since have modified down. So we originally had budgeted $324,000 for severance. Again, that was based on prior years. Now that we have the number firmed up, we were able to reduce that particular line item of our budget by $74,000, now reflecting $250,000 of severance payment. Workers' compensation, we received our final number from our carrier, which again resulted in a decrease to that particular line item of our budget. And then finally, we had educational salary adjustments for staff getting additional credits, and that resulted in an increase of that line item to the tune of about $99,000. So overall, as you can see, we were able to achieve an additional amount of savings of $453,000 for this evening's presentation.
On the revenue side of the house, typically what we've done in the past is we have not budgeted an increase in basic education funding. However, this year, to get to the index, we are at this time recommending that we will put $100,000 of basic education funding into the budget for that. Fund balance payment for severance, as Stu mentioned before, we do have severance payments. Typically, that comes out of the general operating budget. We are recommending moving forward to take that out of the fund balance because that is a one-time item. And then obviously, as the retirements modify, salaries modify, so does the FICA retirement for a savings of $30,055. So overall, the modifications on the revenue side of the house are roughly $320,000.
So for this evening, our total expenditures of $92.6 million are balanced with revenues of the same amount. Currently, the surplus and/or deficit is at zero. The budget does require a base Act 1 index tax increase of 2.3% to offset the expenditure increase for the 1920 budget. And as you can see, the Act 1 base index for the 1920 school year, which is provided by the Department of Education, is 2.3%. So we were able to present a budget for this evening reflecting that base index increase.
So wanted to talk a little bit more about that PA index. As Dr. Whiteleather said, we do get a base index from the state, and that is 2.3%, which does equate to a $1.3 million increase in our taxable amount. School districts can also go to the adjusted index, We are given the base index and then adjusted index through a kind of a complex formula. Our adjusted index is 2.8%. Some school districts go to that. We've always elected to keep our threshold at the base index. The adjusted index would give us an additional $0.28 million. If you recall, every year, one of the things we do, just as a precautionary matter, is we do apply for the exceptions. This year, the school district did qualify for special education, which would give us an adjustment or an additional amount of $112,000, which is beyond the 2.8%. However, we are recommending for consideration not using the exception, not using the adjusted index, and bringing the budget in at the base index.
So as you can see, based on our overall budget presented this evening of the $92.6 million, the increase from the 18-19 budget is $3.8 million, or 4.28%. Just to give a little bit of perspective as to what is comprising that $3.8 million increase, our salary and benefit increases alone represent $2.8 million of that increase, or 75.4% of the overall total increase in the budget. Down at the bottom is an overall budget comparison to prior years. So in 18-19, our current year budget is $88.8 million, or an increase of a little over $4 million from the prior year, or 4.82%. And then lastly, the 17-18 budget at $84.7 million, or a $3.5 million, or 4.41% increase.
So each year, once again, each budget presentation, we like to, again, go through the property tax rebate. Once again, I believe it's important for all of us, if we know of any individuals that meet the qualifications that are here, please have them call the business office, and the staff in the business office will be more than happy to help them fill out the paperwork for the qualified property tax rebate.
So as far as timeline, the board was asked on February 5th to approve the preliminary budget. All of these steps are required under Act 1, so they are mandated steps associated with the budget approval. Once the preliminary budget is adopted, the board is then tasked with two final actions. That second to final action is being requested this evening, which is the proposed final budget. If the board would approve of that this evening, moving forward, there's a couple of items that come into play. One is a 30-day public advertisement of the budget. That is required under the Act 1 timeline. The budget is also publicly advertised, not only on our website, but also on hard copy within the business office. We also have to send in some documentation to the Department of Education, notifying them of our advertisement of the budget. Based on our calendar meet dates looking forward, the next voting meeting for the final budget adoption would be April 30th, 2019.
So that concludes our presentation, and Dr. Whiteleather and I will take any questions at this time.